Well, hello everybody, welcome to Red Toolhouse. On our YouTube channel, we talk about all things homesteading and try to implement some of those things on our rural 100 acres here in southern West Virginia. Well, in today's video, I want to talk about artificial insemination versus having a boar in your pastured pig operation. Which is better? Should you go with AI or should you use a boar? Well, for the sake of full disclosure, I am biased, obviously, because I've only done one of those two options. I've only done AI. I have not had a boar on farm. I've not tried to breed with a boar. So with that being said, we'll still get into this discussion, and we can weigh the pros and cons of both, because there actually are. It's not a clear-cut case of one better than the other. So everyone may not be familiar with artificial insemination when it deals with pigs. When you think of AI and some of the other animals, goats and cattle, I'm not sure about horses, I don't know anything about horses, then you see there's a little bit more work involved, there's a little bit more cost involved, and there's a lot more potential for loss. From my basic research and some of the other animals when it comes to AI, that you can do a lot more. It's like pied paper, the sound of my voice brings everybody in. That you can get away with a lot. You can be sloppier, if you will, with AI and pigs and still be able to have a successful breeding. Now, we've been breeding pigs for about 5 years now, so we've had some ups and downs, of course, with our breeding process, but I'll say with AI, we've been very, very successful. We've had a really good success rate. Maybe twice in our entire process did we have two breeding opportunities that didn't take. Other than that, we had a very successful breeding. We had a very good litters. We had quite a bit of success there. So with AI and pigs, of course you can, it's getting crazy. With AI and pigs, you have a longer shelf life with the semen than maybe you do with other animals breeding with AI. So with pigs, you can have up to 10 days of storage of the semen you've received before it starts to downgrade, before it becomes less viable. Everybody's in the pool. So that's what I really like about it. When I order my semen for artificial insemination, I can just keep it in, it usually comes with some cool packs, and really the only thing to worry about is keeping it at a certain temperature, roughly in the mid-60s, and then of course agitating it a couple times a day, just stirring it up, because the stabilizer in that can settle, and you want to keep that all stirred up. I'm not going to go into the full details of how we AI. I've actually got a video we did several years ago. I'll link to it up here. And YouTube doesn't like it too much. They don't like me promoting it, because I guess it gets into some stuff that they don't feel is family friendly. Anyway, so with artificial insemination in pigs, you do have some benefit there. You can have your product hanging around longer, and it doesn't have to be kept frozen. It doesn't have to be kept at specific temperatures. Like I said, it just needs to be cool in those 60 degrees. So in looking at this comparison between AI and breeding with a boar, let's talk at it from the perspective of AI. Again, that's what I'm familiar with, and we'll kind of weigh the pros and the cons of either. So what are some of the pros of artificial insemination? Well, for us, the number one pro is being able to select our breeding times. So if you imagine, I've got 4 sows on this side. These are our growers, obviously. I've got 4 sows that go into heat every 21 days. So imagine throughout the course of a year, they're going into heat every 21 days. That is a lot of heat cycles. I breed one time a year. Now, I'm not going to keep all 4 of these sows to breed this fall. You have to go back and see other videos about that. But if I had a boar on farm, then I would have to worry about keeping those separate. That boar, of course, would like to hook up with those sows when they're in heat. Hormones, all that's rocking. So with a single strand of electric and pasture fence processes, that may or may not keep a boar at bay. Again, I don't have a boar. I've not run into that situation yet. But my fear would be that a boar could get out and get over to the sow, or vice versa, the sow come to the boar, and we have an unwanted pregnancy. We have farrowing that gets off my schedule. The last thing I want is to end up with a bunch of piglets at the wrong time of year, and I really don't have a plan for them then. I know you could say, well, just sell them. Well, a lot of people have that attitude, and unfortunately that's why you see a hack it up, fuzzball. A lot of people have that mentality, and that's why you see a glut at times of piglets on the market, and that really drives your piglet prices down, of course. So being in control of that breeding cycle is really the number one pro to me. It by far outweighs the benefits that I've seen with a boar. Again, you all may disagree, but that's kind of where we're coming from. Well, the second most important benefit of AI versus having a boar is it allows us to introduce new genetics easier. So if you can imagine, like this crew here was all bred out of a mix between a Hampshire, actually a Hampshire Duroc cross. Merida is a Hampshire Duroc cross. And then we took that Hampshire Duroc cross Merida and bred her with another line of Duroc. So these guys are, what, 75% Duroc and 25% Hampshire. So we were able to introduce new genetics. We were able to play around with that a little bit. Now I've introduced Duroc. I've done Berkshire. I've played around with I think maybe another Hampshire I've done. I have to go back and look at my notes, actually. But that allowed me to bring that in when I was ready to say, okay, let's try this sow who's landrace, and we'll put Duroc in her and see what we get. Well, this one we're going to put Berkshire in her and see what we get. So it allows me to bring all this in. Obviously, if I had a boar, then I'd have to bring in those different boars. So either have to have that inventory here of boars, or I'd have to obviously go find somebody that has that boar and say, hey, can we have date night? Can we bring your boar over and hang out for a while? So that could be a little bit of a logistics issue as well. So one other concern I'd have with a boar when it comes to genetics is that you can really run the cycle in a couple generations with your boar. If you only had one boar, if you were a small operation like us, and you could only justify one boar, then you can imagine as you start going down through your generations, it's my understanding, I really haven't experimented with it much, that inbreeding in swine isn't that big of a deal. But you can imagine, regardless, whether they end up sitting around on the front porch playing a banjo because you've inbred them so much, or that you just simply have exhausted any genetic diversity there. If I keep breeding offspring, let's say I keep one boar around and I just keep breeding and breeding and breeding to his children, his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren, then of course that's going to limit that genetic diversity. We're not going to have that hybrid vigor that we like there. So to me that seems like it's one of those situations where you're going to have to rotate that boar out after a couple generations and bring in some new genetics there. So you're not going to be able to keep that boar around very long anyway. Another benefit of AI is the cost. Now again, this is kind of a loaded statement because there's times that AI could be cheaper than having a boar, and there's times that having the boar could be cheaper. Usually when I breed for the year, the amount of doses that I get with shipping and everything, I'm usually about $300. So if you think of just in feed costs alone and keeping a boar, if you did the quick math, 3 to 5 pounds a day, 365 days, feeds X, blah, 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 then you're looking at $200 to $250 just in my quick math on what you'd have in feed costs just for one boar. And that doesn't take into consideration the cost of separate infrastructure to keep them separate, any other things, that deworming, all those type of things that you need to do to all your pigs. But that's one more mouth to feed that you're only going to use, in my situation, I'm only going to use one time a year. So for me, AI made more sense cost-wise as well. It was probably a break-even as far as cash goes, but the costs in the long run were cheaper with AI. Well, another benefit that's really important to me is with AI, I know almost down to the day, again, some of you who watch our channel would laugh and say, oh, Troy, maybe not. I know almost to the day the farrowing dates of my sows because I am the one administering the semen, so I'm the trigger, if you will, in breeding the pigs. So I can simply look at that and say, okay, 115 days from now is when we should have a farrowing, if that indeed is taken. Now again, you don't, the day you AI, you're not like, oh, that pig's pregnant. You wait until, let's see if another heat cycle shows up or not. But I can go back and do that math. I can say, okay, I bred this pig on this date, so this date should be when she farrows. And of course, there's signs that you can see. She's bagging up, those type of things. It's not like it's a total surprise. But if you look on some of these pastured pig forums that I check out and belongs to, you see people constantly asking, hey, do you think she's pregnant? Or do you think she's going to go anytime soon? I think she may farrow soon, and they may be 2 weeks off. And that could be the difference of quite a bit of having a successful farrowing or having a farrowing that becomes an issue. So I like having the fact of knowing the date pretty much down to 24 to 36 hours. Again, if you've seen some of our videos, you see that I had a swing and a miss this year when it came to Mercy and her farrowing date being early. Me not remembering that she would be 3 days early. Hey, can y'all hold it down? I'm trying to work here. Crazy pigs. So one other issue that I see with a boar versus AI is obviously that boar over time is going to get old, and maybe his quality of production decreases, maybe his stability to be able to stand up and do his job decreases. So at some point I'm going to have to phase him out anyway. Now I know some of you guys that do breeding with boars, you may have your boar 6, 7+ years and you're still getting good production. That's great. But I think if you look at the typical situation there, the viability of that boar is going to decrease over time, and he's going to have to be replaced at some point anyway. And to me, one of the last pros of doing AI instead of having a boar is, and it's not really that huge, but just safety concerns. Again, I don't have a boar on property, so I can't speak from specific experience here, but some of my other friends that I know have boars, maybe a little bit more aggression, maybe not. Some of those are pretty laid back. But just that additional safety concern. Boars, obviously pretty big dudes, can get a little hateful, got the tusks, bigger tusks than the sows grow, of course. So that can be a concern. If you've got kids, or if your wife or your spouse helps out, then there's a chance that you need to take that into consideration. But obviously you need to take safety consideration in with any pig. Even these little guys can take your feet out from under you and give you a bad day. And even a sow, you don't want to tangle with a 600-pound sow, regardless of the situation there. Well, just so you don't think I'm completely biased and not even going to talk about some of the benefits of the boar, let's look at some of the cons of AI. And I've kind of touched upon some of them. The first one, and the obvious one, is what if it doesn't take? Again, I mentioned I spent about $300 at one time to get my semen doses in, and that's usually about 6 doses with shipping, all that. So I get 6 doses in. Well, what happens if they don't take? And I've had that happen twice throughout the 5 years, so the odds are less. But if it doesn't take, then there's a situation where I'm just out that money. So it's not like I can just say, hey, boar, you didn't do a good job this time. Get in there and do it again. So it's one of those situations where, okay, you could just be out of that money. I could have $300 just gone like that. So that could be an issue. Another con, of course, still hangs out in that area of cost, is volume. So again, I talk about breeding. I don't breed 4 sows. The most I've bred at one single time is 3. But let's say I was going to breed 4, I was going to breed 8, I was going to breed 12. Well, when you start looking at those individual dose costs of $25 to $35, depending on what you're doing or how you're doing it, then that can add up pretty quick. So you can say, well, Troy, if I have a boar, my boar can service all the sows. He's a good dude, man. He's ready to go. He can get in there and service 10 sows, 12 sows, whatever the case may be. Then that makes sense at that point, because the volume there is going to, the cost is going to get higher and higher with AI. You don't get bulk discounts in those situations, usually. So you're going to have that increased cost, whereas a boar is going to be able to take care of that however he needs to. So depending on the size of your operation, when you get to where you're breeding 5, 6, 7, 10 pigs at a time, or even a season, then a boar may make more sense there. Well, another con, and this kind of gets over into the prepper side a little bit, is I like the fact that the pigs on our farm are generated on our farm. So we're kind of a closed loop, but I still have an input coming in. I have the input of the semen. So if a situation would arise where I don't have the funds to purchase the semen at that time to breed, or the bottom falls out and there's no shipping of semen available for me to mail order, then I don't have a way. Like right now, if for some reason I would need to breed pigs, I've got all these gilts behind the camera there. I've got 4 viable sows. I got no donor. I got nobody to produce that. So that could be an issue. You know, look at it from a prepper situation, is you don't have the resource. You're still relying on an external input to be able to keep your pig breeding going. Well, another con that falls into that cost category could be just simply a mistake on my part, the farmer's part, of missing the window of stand. So the way it works where I get my semen, they only collect twice a week. So they collect, it's an overnight ship to me. So I can say, well, okay, if they collect on Mondays, I think Mondays and Wednesdays when they collect. So, okay, if you're collecting on Monday, my sow should go into heat on Tuesday. Well, if you only collect on Monday, that won't work. I've got to get Wednesday from the previous week's collection. So that means by the time it shows up, it's already 5 days old. So you can see there's some logistics there that have to be figured out. But if I miscalculate or just something happens, I have a rainy day, or I break my leg, unfortunately, or even just have a cold, or that knocks me on my butt and I can't get out there and do that, then bang, I could be out all that money simply because I missed the window of stand. If I had a boar there, the boar doesn't need me to be a part of it. He's hanging out. He's like, hey, look, they're standing. Put me in, coach. I'm ready to go. So he's going to be able to do it. He doesn't need my help per se to be able to breed. So he's not going to miss the standing window as much as I would, of course. And that's a possibility. Well, another con, of course, is availability. When you look at all the different breeds of pigs out there, you may say, wow, I really want to try a heritage. Like, I'd love to breed Abigail with a Ossabaw Island or something like that. The source that I have doesn't have heritage breeds. They really only have maybe 5 different breeds to choose from. So it's like, well, okay, that's a great source that I use, but it doesn't give me the variety that I'd like. So there could be an availability issue. And of course, the way I do it, again, you go back to look at my artificial insemination video to get the details of this, that I'm not buying, to keep costs down, I'm not buying specific breed of pig to say, hey, I want that boar right there. I want what's ever left over of a specific breed. So say, well, just give me whatever the Duroc you have left over for the week, and I don't pay that full price. Well, there's a chance that one of these weeks I do that, they don't have that available. I haven't run into that yet, so I don't know how much of an issue that could be. But obviously, if they say, hey, we didn't have any this week, you want to substitute for something else, or do you want to wait till next week? Well, I really can't wait till next week because I could lose my stand cycle, my heat cycle. So I may just have to put off until the next heat cycle comes up, which delays my entire process. And one other con that I hear guys that are really into keeping their own boar say that they don't like about AI, I don't have evidence to back it up either way. It's the question of concentration. When these guys that have these breeding farms, when they're taking these semen samples and they're taking one dose, one deposit from the boar, are they spreading that out and filling up multiple vials, multiple doses to say, okay, this was one shot, pardon the pun there, from the boar that's going into 10 shots of doses. So they've watered down that concentration versus if a boar gets to hang out with a sow, he's obviously going to be fully concentrated, and of course he's going to be able to dose as much as he feels up to or the sow allows him to. So again, I don't know how true that statement is. There's got to be some truth to it, of course, but how much does that actually affect viability? Now, we've always had good litters. We've had as many as 18, and of course we've had some lousy litters, but that may not necessarily be directly related to the semen sample. Of course, it takes 2 to tango, so it could be issues with the boar or with the sow. So am I suggesting that if you have a boar, you need to get rid of it and go strictly to AI? Absolutely not. I think, in fact, I could probably be convinced pretty easily to give a boar a try, just simply because I think there's pros and cons to both sides. In fact, in thinking of if I was going to do something, introduce a boar, how would I handle it? I would actually try a bit of a hybrid. Maybe the first generation, let's say, let's take 4 gilts out of this group here in the hot tub. So if I said, I'm going to take 4 gilts, and I'm going to breed those, and I'm going to do AI with those, and I'm going to pick 4 different types of boars, 4 different breeds, and breed those 4, get the litters from them, and say, okay, wow, who do we have? How many boars did I get out of those litters? And just watch and check confirmation, check the growth, check all those type of things, and say, well, okay, I've got some pretty good candidates here that are going to stick around to be future breeders. So you may be able to kind of pick your own team at that point and have a wide selection. You know, the one or two that passes gets to hang out and hang out with the ladies for a couple years. The ones that don't go to freezer camp. Now again, you may have issues with selling intact boars at that point for meat because of boar taint. Again, a whole nother discussion there. But that would be an option I would possibly consider, and that way I'm kind of recruiting my own boar out of the field of AI genetics I've chosen. It really, when it comes down to it, as far as why I chose the path that I did with AI, is simply because my first point was just, I like to have control of when the sows are bred. Now there's some things I could do infrastructure-wise to take care of that, I get that, but that's just where I've landed. So if you've considered doing AI, but you're kind of intimidated by it, let me put those fears at ease. It's super easy to do. But if you thinking you've done AI and you want to try a boar, again, just make sure you've got some of these infrastructure elements in place and give it a go. I think no matter which direction you go, just make sure it's a setup that fits your operation. Make sure you have all your bases covered. If you're going to go with a boar, make sure you've got that infrastructure in place. That way you can control when he breeds. If you're going with AI, then of course just make sure you got your schedule and your timing all figured out. Well, all right, well, I hope this was helpful. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't. Check us out on our website at redtoolhouse.com. Take care, everybody.